We're stoked to be joined by Springbok 7-star Nagato Blue Angels player, CrossFit athlete, 2022 Springbok Player of the Year, Nadine Roos. It's quite the resume. Nadine, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Scott.
I've just mentioned it there. You've obviously been in Japan for kind of the last 6 months or so. You signed a 6-month contract with the Blue Angels last year. You were the first South African woman to do so. You guys went 24 games undefeated, winning 4 championships. What was life like in Japan, and what did you enjoy most about being over there?
Life in Japan was, it looked a little bit different as it is a different culture. You're surrounded with a whole different kind of atmosphere, environment, that you're used to in South Africa. And also, like, you're not only surrounded with Japanese people, but also there was a few other foreigners also in the team. So that was also like, experiencing the culture they have and, the way they are as people. But life in general, eating style, try to stick to what I know. The environment or the city that I was in, it's there's a lot of old people in the town, and they move quite slower in a way that they drive slower. They're respectful towards the environment they're in. They obey the laws, which is, it's they don't skip a red light, which is quite a, also adjustment to see how people like that can be so respectful and obedient towards the country's law. And that was quite good to see, and to experience it. It's also it was interesting to see that they don't hoot at all. When you hear someone hoot, you're like, oh, what did you do wrong? So it's not something, it's not a regular thing that you will hear when you drive around. The environment was really nice to see. The nature is beautiful. Like everywhere you look, it's green and quite like a healthy, living style, if you can say it that way. Yeah, I think the city itself or the little town, if you are there to only focus on rugby, it's a good place and environment to be in because there's not a lot of distractions. The club itself it's situated in a good place, good training facilities and access to everything you will basically need as an athlete. We also the pool where we could go to. There's a sauna. There's the pool facilities that you can make use of when you want to do recovery. And Japan is obviously known for their onsens as well, where you can go to. So for as a professional athlete, that was just a good environment, to be in. And then the people you're surrounded with as well. Everyone kind of with the same mindset. I think the club is quite successful in, creating that winning culture. I think that's why they got the foreigners in this year that they wanted, because at the end of the day, the goal for the team was to be the most successful team this year in the season. So in general, with the lifestyle that fits into the way, I work with in South Africa as well. Like, everything you want, you strive towards as an athlete is to be successful. So that just basically sums up how the living style was there. The apartments we also stayed in was quite nice. All the basics, that you need, almost like a kind of a big apartment for one person. The Japanese room, 2 living rooms, and then you have your bedroom, a kitchen and a bathroom. So, just painting that picture, it's enough for you to stay in 6 months. Being away from home, creating a place that you can call home. So it was quite a special season over in Japan.
That sounds awesome. And question for me, I know you were studying Japanese before you went over. What's your Japanese like? Did it get any better, and are you fluent yet?
Trying, obviously, been there last year with the 15s with our test series against Japan, and I always think Japanese is one of the most difficult languages to speak, and especially the way they write, with the characters they have. So it's quite difficult. You don't even see words or anything. So it's quite interesting. I did some Japanese classes in Japan, and it's a different way. They have a whole different way of actually speaking. So for me, that was very interesting, and just to speak like the basic Japanese, because again, the town that I was in, it's the area where it is. It's like a 9-hour drive from Tokyo. So when you're in Tokyo, you might bump into someone that can actually talk fluently English. Whereas in Nagato, it's quite a small town. Most of the Japanese people, like I said, is old people. So a lot of them can't speak English. So when you get into a restaurant to order food, or you want to order coffee, it's quite difficult because they don't understand English. So, and then you also try to pronounce it the way that if they would pronounce it in English, how it will sound to them. So that was a good thing to adapt with, like adapting to the way they, how they do things and stuff. But yeah, like back to the Japanese, went for Japanese classes. I'm actually still busy, continuing learning Japanese on the Duolingo app, because on the World Series, I will meet the people that, played with me in the club, and it will just be special, to be able to speak with them in Japanese, and maybe they'll respond better back in English to me, because I know they're also learning English. That's just also special, with the people you're surrounded with, is that there's like a two-way stream. You try to learn their language, and they try to learn English to to communicate better with you as well.
Yeah, that sounds really, really cool. And you're obviously now back in South Africa for training, etc. We spoke about it off air, but you're obviously back to you're not going back to Japan. Is your plan to kind of stay with the sevens team during the domestic season, or are you thinking of signing for one of the local 15s clubs?
Yeah, I think at the moment the 15s clubs are I think they still have August and September, to play the domestic competition. But I think for me, around where I'm at now, my main focus is sevens. Like I mentioned earlier, we have the Olympic qualifiers coming up in October. Then December, the World Series starts, and it's quite an action-packed season in terms of the World Series. And then it's Olympics next year. And I think focus on one thing and be perfect in one thing, and control one thing that, that's in your control. So for me, that's my focus at the moment, is focusing on sevens, because there's some goals I want to reach in sevens. So yeah.
Looking to kind of the rest of the year, as we've touched on there, I'm personally hoping and assuming that you'll be playing in the World 15 series, which is going to be happening in Cape Town. Are you excited to get back into that setup? Having been away from home, and have you missed being at home?
Yeah, I've definitely missed home. There's nothing like home. Your own food. I still believe our country has the best food. Like a braai broodjie and a braai vleisie. There's just something different to our meat. But yeah, it's special being back home. It's special to be surrounded, with the people that you also your whole life, have been working hard with. So for me, it's special being back home. It's just something different. It's good to speak Afrikaans again. My English is good, but it's not great. So yeah, for me, being back home is good. With the World 15s, coming up in October, it just shows also, how World Rugby wants to develop the women's game. And I think it's good bringing it to South Africa. As one of our team goals is to inspire the younger generation. But the only way to inspire them is bringing rugby, to your country, and playing in Cape Town. It will just give it more exposure to the younger girls out there, for them to come and watch and see what it's all about. And that's also something special, being back home. If I'm going to be part of it, I'm not sure yet, as it's overflowing with the Olympic qualifiers. And I think just in terms of, if I have to look at last year, it was it was a big season in terms of playing 15s and 7s, doing both World Cups, the preparation for the 15s World Cup, and then going straight into the 7s, for the 7s World Cup. If I have to look at my game time, I almost played only full games. And then if you have to look at it in a long term, the longevity of your career, it's always a massive positive, getting so much game time, because that's what we in the end want as athletes, and that's the only way that you can get better. Like, you can train, but game time is the ultimate time that you can get. And the more you play, the more experience you gain. So we'll see what happens in October, but I think in terms of, I can only do what I can do, and the rest is in the coaches' hands. Like, the plans they have, they also work well together, in terms of what they would want out of the whole competitions. So that's still something that, we will discuss. But like I said, 7s at this moment is my main focus. So yeah, I hope it answers the question.
Oh, no, it absolutely does. And I know you said that your English isn't great, but that's a lie. Your English is definitely a lot better than my Afrikaans. So there we go. Some people won't know your story and kind of your upbringing, etc., which you've been really open and honest about on various interviews, kind of things that I've read. For those who don't know, who is Omasari, and why did she have such a big influence on you when you were growing up?
So Omasari is my grandmother, my mother's mom. So yeah, she basically just, took me into her house and took me under her guardian, when my mother had her stuff going on in her life, and which she prioritized, above me. And I think, like, the way my grandmother raised me was, she took me in, didn't have a lot of money, so she had to go a long way, to raise another child on her old age, which is quite special. Like, I am today where I am because of her, and I will forever be grateful, for her, making a sacrifice like that, raising your grandchild. I don't think it's an easy job, so, and also raising me with what she had. And also, she in her own way, she taught me a lot of things, values in life that shaped me as a person. Circumstances also shape you as a person, and it's up to you what you want to do, with your circumstances. And I think, like, like, almost like, man up, like, do what you can, and, be someone, that can stand on their own feet. And when they have to do something, just do something. And money doesn't define your success. It's what you do, to become something that will define your success. And that comes down to hard work, that she taught me to do my whole life.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And my favorite athletes are the ones that can acknowledge the people that have helped them along the way, but also the circumstances that they came through. I think the whole victim versus victor, when it comes to your circumstances, is really, really important. Now, when you were younger, I believe you were quite the athlete, and you had your pick of kind of sports growing up. What made you fall in love with rugby specifically, and what kind of drew you into playing the sport?
Yeah, I think, growing up on the farm where we used to stay, playing with the boys, like, all kind of sports. We played cricket, baseball, we ran against each other, and, they couldn't believe that I was faster than them. So they were always trying to prove a point, and that's also just growing up in a rugby house. Like, it was always open to watch rugby, and, going over on the farm, to the other people's house, watching rugby, supporting the Springboks, supporting the Blue Bulls. It just growing up in a sporting environment like that, it just gives you that exposure. So for me, when I was younger, my grandmother allowed me to participate in sport. And when I got to high school, it obviously changed a bit because of academics. You have a more full time in that, and mostly that's the priority of the school is your academics. And then also there was more money involved in, doing the sports, because you had to go away a lot and stuff. So then you kind of have to choose the sports you want to do. But I think I was still fortunate enough to do athletics, to play netball, to do cross country, to play cricket, and still have access, to all those kind of things. But also people who supported me throughout, my high school career, when myself and my grandmother was very, grateful for people who was willing to help us, that knew the circumstances. So yeah, for me, basically rugby was just part of, growing up, and never did I think of ever playing, for the Springboks women's rugby. I didn't even know there was women's rugby in South Africa. So I only found out of women's rugby when I got to university. And, I think like I'm a Christian, and I'm a firm believer, and I believe that one door, like God closed one door for me and opened another one, and that was rugby. And like, even it just shows you, like, even though you might have your own dreams and your goals in life, but still there was a pathway of still being able to represent your country on the highest level. And for me as a little girl, for me, it didn't matter in which sport code I might do it, but that dream was, the biggest dream was to represent my country in a sport. And I hoped it would have been athletics, but, it changed, and God's plan changed for me to be rugby. And yeah, look where it brought me now. So, grateful in that way that, God's plan, just shows in my life, and the pathway that he created brought me also to where I am today.
You've touched on something quite nicely there, which we actually spoke about with Libby Janssen van Rensburg, who you've obviously played with before. To my knowledge, it's quite difficult for young girls in grade 1 or grade 2 to play rugby, because it's not a widely available sport at that age, specifically for girls. Most of the time it's your netballs or your hockeys or whatever it might be. Do you think that that's one of the biggest limiting factors, or possibly even the biggest barrier for young girls trying to get into rugby?
Yes, I definitely think in South Africa it is, because if I have to think, when you're young, you can play with boys, and, for some girls who might not have a brother or a cousin or, those type of friends that you can just go and play rugby with, they don't get that exposure. So, and there might definitely be girls, like I know in primary school, there was billicky rugby, where I was fortunate enough also, to be part of. I had one other friend also who played with me, and it was only the two girls of us. But then you get some girls who ask these questions, and we're like, you're still too young to be able to go and play at the club, because that's just the regulations, of World Rugby and SA Rugby, that when you're not over 18, you can't play in these type of competitions. So I think, for young girls, and especially to develop women's rugby, and I think all over the world, we must start looking at implementing, even if it's touch rugby, just to get the feeling of the basic skills required to play rugby. It doesn't necessarily have to be contact, until they get to university, but to get the techniques on an early age into kind of, the system, and get the feel of it the same way as boys do. So I guess it has like the pros and cons of it, like the con of it might be the longevity of the women's career might be then shorter, if they start playing it at the younger age. But then, and the other con of it is like they don't, or the pro of it is that they develop the skills on an early age, which is what you want, because you don't want players to come into the national setup and only now learn how to pass. Like just the development of a child, it plays part of those type of things. So if you have to dig deeper into it, then you would find the psychological part of it, why it will benefit, women, especially women's rugby. The standard of the game will obviously lift, and if you have to compare our women's rugby or SA women's rugby compared to Australia women's rugby, I mean, they are so more advanced than us just by looking how they play with their skill, and for us to meet that, we need to start somewhere. I mean, the touch league is quite big in Australia. So they have all these things in place where they have background in. And then if you look at us, I know there's touch rugby, because I know Libby also, played touch rugby. But the question, is it enough for the development of women's rugby? And, for us, we want girls in high school maybe, to start playing rugby, even if it's touch or tag, like I said, again, without contact, because I know there's issues around, the growth of even young boys and the impact it has on the brain, when they get concussions and stuff. So for women, I believe, it can start in high school already with touch or tag rugby. So
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting, and certainly something that needs to start happening for the growth of the game. The women's game is growing at a great speed at the moment in terms of the exposure, and it's not where it needs to be, but by any means. The reality is what's most important is equality and women supporting each other, but men also getting involved in the women's game and supporting the women's teams. What would your message be to those people who are maybe only watching the men's game at the moment?
Yeah, I think for me, even watching the soccer World Cup now, I think New Zealand had, with the New Zealand women's game, another record with a stadium, 42,000 people watching the game. And it just shows that in general, women's sport is growing. And I believe that people shouldn't put a label, on women or the brand of rugby, if I can say it in that way. I think if people come out and just actually watch the women's game like they would watch the men's game, they will see something different and special in women, because women just bring something different than what men would bring. And I think if people invest the time in women's sport in general, they will see it the same way as we see it, So for those people who never invested their time in watching women in sport, maybe do yourself a favor, and if there's a women's soccer game on, or if there's a women's rugby game on, do yourself a favor and watch it. They will, like I said, they will see something different, and it's just something special as to what men bring. So for me, that's very simple, and it's quite a difficult thing to encourage people to watch those type of things, because I think perspective is everything. Some people might like it, some people might not like it, but it also just comes down to a respect thing. Know that women put their body through the same things as men do, to get the same result and to be just as successful as the men is. So for me, that's the simplest way, that I can put it out there for people and for the public to view.
It is just genuinely a case of getting eyes on the games and really encouraging people to do that. Now, I'm always fascinated by what professional athletes would maybe do differently, or what advice they'd give their younger selves. So what would your advice be to a young Nadine Roos, or any young players wanting to become professional sports people?
For me, it's quite difficult, because I don't think I would do something differently, that I had done in the past. I've always been someone, who paid close attention to what I do, living a healthy lifestyle, being fit, being addicted to run, addicted to being in the gym, and, being mindful to what I put into my body. Maybe doing recovery stuff earlier on in my life. Not that I've neglected it, but just my knowledge around it. It's only later on in my sporting career that I've noticed that, okay, like, this is what I can do better to recover better for the next day. So, and just learning the the body mechanics, what works for your body specifically might not work for someone else's body. So in terms of that, like, even if you don't want to go far in sport, just try to live a healthy lifestyle. And it doesn't mean that you need to eat right, or you can't have a cheat meal when you feel like it. I think your body speaks to you, so listen to what your body says, because it's a special type of creature thing, that you're blessed with, and you only have one body, so make it a good body while you live. So maybe that's the type of advice I would give someone, and I would give my younger self. But like I said, I don't think I would change anything to the little Nadine Roos, if I have to look in it at that way.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I wish it's advice somebody had given to me when I was in my teens, just recovery, stretching, that kind of thing, because I was always the guy that would go into the gym and I'd go, right, what's my workout? And I would always go, well, my warm-up's just the lighter weights and then getting into the heavier weights. And trust me, now I'm regretting it. I'm in my 20s and my back hurts, and that's not okay. Now, Nadine, you're 27 and we may still see you for quite a few World Cups, some Olympic Games, maybe 2 Olympic Games before you retire. Have you thought about life after rugby? And do you think that you might become a coach or ref? Where's your mind at in terms of, because you're clearly a student of the game and a dedicated athlete, so I suspect you'll probably want to be involved in some way, shape, or form.
Yes, I think giving back the knowledge that I gained over the years in my career, it's definitely something that I would want to give back. I am currently studying strength and conditioning as well, so I think going into coaching is definitely something that I would do. I definitely also something in CrossFit. What I've learned in my CrossFit career as well is that I enjoy helping the people around me. When I see they might struggle with a certain movement, I'm always like eager to go over and to tell them, maybe try this, or try look at this. So that's definitely something that's within me, and it's passion for the sport, passion to help people and see people living a healthy lifestyle, in their own unique way, not the same way as how I would, live. So I think that's just, something that's genetically within me, in doing it in that way. And that's definitely something, that I would want to give back after my career, and definitely maybe look at maybe starting a rugby academy that looks into developing skills with younger girls. It can also be boys, but I think the main focus will be the girls. So that's definitely something that I would want to give back, and something that I'm looking into, after my rugby career.
That's really interesting, especially the CrossFit side of things, because like a lot of people know that you're a rugby player, but they don't necessarily know that you're also a CrossFit athlete. And then you're studying strength and conditioning, and you're studying Japanese. I'm not quite sure when you get time to sleep. But in terms of kind of how we like to end the podcast, we always like to end on a bit of a quick fire round. Best player you've played with or played against?
Against, definitely, man, there's a lot. But against must be Stacey Walker.
Right. And then maybe somebody you've played with, is there a player that stands out for you?
Played with Martha Simmers.
Nice. CrossFit or rugby?
Oh no. Both.
Both. And then what's the best game of your career? What's the game that really stands out for you?
The New Zealand game that we played in Cape Town, or against New Zealand, Cape Town 2019.
Do you have any pre-match rituals?
Yes, I'm kind of a routine person when it comes to game day. So I'm basically, I stick to my routine. Like do my activation, quite blowout is something that I will definitely do before a game.
Lovely stuff. Now, Nadine, thanks for being such a great guest and so willing to share your story and give us some insight into your career at the moment. Good luck on the international stage this year, whether that's 7s or 15s. can't wait to see you tear it up and playing in the green and gold again.
Thank you, Scott, for having me on your podcast.
That interview with Nadine Roos, very, very interesting for me, and a lot of insight into the women's game there. And hopefully a couple of people have learned some stuff from that. But